if you just do it, it'll turn out okay. Welcome, everyone, to Talking Time with Caffeine, the only podcast where we talk about whatever we feel like half the time.
It'll turn out okay.
Oh.
Welcome, everyone, to Talking Time with Caffeine.
And there. That was slow. Anyways, my guest today is, introduce your guest for today.
Oh, introduce me? Okay. Hi, I'm Bill Ludlow. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I've been involved in the creation evolution controversy, if you call it that, the discussions for a long time. Fairly new to YouTube, though. I debated Kent Hovind a couple of years ago, and that kind of put me a little more in the spotlight because I think I did pretty well on that one. It was one of the first debates that he had where he really took a hit. I also have the website creationsciencefiction.com, and that's been completely revised lately. It's really quite a resource. I'm trying to make it like a modern day Talk Origins type thing, where Talk Origins was great in its time, but it hasn't been updated much, and it's not very easy to use and navigate. So
yeah, I went there. I went there a few years ago. Was like trying to find some stuff. It was like, okay, where do I go here?
Yeah, it's just not easy to use. Where mine's a modern format, and I've got a refuting creationism page with, I believe, over 50 topics now, where you can just literally go and click on a button, and you get either a short article or a short video or something that talks about the creationist argument for it, and then gives a rebuttal to that. So. It's just a good resource for people to use.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. He also has a forum there. You can check it out. Not many people are on it right now, but
no, the forum's really new. A couple of weeks. I've had a few posts. I haven't looked at it myself in a couple of days. I need to get there and look at it more often. I was a little worried because I went up camping and fishing with my girlfriend and her grandkids last week for 5 days, and I was all worried that the forum was going to get, trolled or something, but it hasn't happened yet. So,
hey, just remember, if people are trolling you, that means you're famous. They
right?
They wouldn't troll nobody. they troll the attention. They know that people will watch the trolls.
Well, I've got my own stalker, so I must be getting real famous now.
So yeah, I'm new to the debate scene myself. I've been watching reaction like the response videos for a few years now, but it wasn't until like recently I've been watching actual debates or discussions, discussing things, and it's like I don't know. It's just I don't know. I think personally I like the reaction videos better, response videos, because I don't know. Sometimes it's just hard to sit through at least 45 minutes or whatever of uninterrupted them talking, saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I just realized I had my headphones on, but I wasn't using them. I was listening to the computer. So I don't know if we were getting an echo there before or not.
I didn't hear one.
You didn't hear one? Okay, good.
No. So. But anyways, I watched your debate / discussions with both Kent Hovind and Nephilim Free.
Okay.
A few days ago. And I was wondering, which person gave you the bigger concussion when you keep hitting your head on the desk or whatever?
Well, two totally different types of debates or whatever. With Kent Hovind, I knew who he was.
Same catchphrases for a year, so you can.
Yeah. I mean, I literally had watched his videos and the parts on them where he talked about human origins, and I had a plan, to where but what I did too was I didn't focus on what he had said previously in my opening presentation at all. I literally just gave the evidence. I mean, the title of the debate was, "Is there evidence for human evolution?" And basically we were talking about crossing that border from ape to human, which would be macro evolution. And I presented, over 3 million years worth of evidence there, that there was no break in the transition at all, and didn't want to even address anything that I knew he was going to bring up. Then he turned around and spouted, his usual nonsense for 15, 20 minutes, didn't address 95% of what I said. I mean, he did his rehearsed thing, and while he was doing that, I was putting the slides in order to do my rebuttal to that. So in the end, he really didn't even address any of the evidence that I said. So that was a different type of thing. With Nephilim Free, to be honest, I haven't even gone back and watched it since the debate or whatever you call it, so I can't probably even really critique it. All I just remember in my mind was, I was talking about some geological concepts and some things, and he was going off just like with things that I'd never heard of because they're not
reality.
It's not reality. It's not anything that anyone teaches in geology. It was like things that he was literally making up off the top of his head. And of course, he accused me of not knowing what the creationists teach about, because I had mentioned in another discussion or something about the post-flood boundary. Yeah. And the post-flood boundary has been a real sticking point, a real controversial thing among creationists for decades. And it's been discussed by dozens of flood geologists, if you want to call them that, or other creationists. And so, yeah, it's a real thing. I mean, it's a real problem for them. And he's telling me that, no, there's no such thing. And nobody, I mean, it was just really weird. I mean, he just was off the cuff and unprepared and just literally making things up as he went along. And it's, how do you even deal with somebody like that? You can't hardly even deal with somebody like that. Then he wanted to go back and debate it again, and I'm like, no, this has just been enough. I mean, so that one was a real head banger, as far as pounding my head on the desk, I guess. But like I said, I haven't even gone back and watched it again. It's something I just want to put behind me.
I used to be, if I admit it, I used to be in the creationist camp, not the young Earth creationist camp. I was in the old Earth camp.
Okay.
For a long time, because I was in the thing where like the fighting my brain thing, where I knew the Bible is correct, because the Bible is correct, obviously. And but I was reading these history books, about prehistoric trilobites and prehistoric, like the Cambrian, all that stuff. I'm like, well, that's gotta be true too. But the Bible's gotta be true too. So like, the brain is like trying to fight itself. Like, but
now, did you eventually reconcile that? Are you still a creationist? Or
no. Then I switched to. Okay. I went over to theistic evolution for a while. Now I really know what I am. I know I'm not a creationist. I know I believe in evolution. Well, not what say believe, but evolution. But you know what I mean? It's like I'm like transitioning right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like Noah's Ark thing. I know Noah's Ark doesn't exist now, but a few years ago, like 5 years ago, I was still down in it. I was like, okay, Noah's Ark's got to be real because it's in the Bible, obviously. So, but it could have been 4,000 years ago because the Indians, the Native Americans were in America 10,000 years ago. So I'm like, so I guess that meant it happened earlier. Like obviously it happened earlier it happened before 10,000 years ago. Duh. I was like, that mindset, just pushing it back.
Well, you had asked me to talk about science education, as a topic, and I thought about that a bit. I just want people to know I'm not a professional science educator, and what I do, I feel I'm a science educator by the videos that I make,
like the science communicator type person,
right? Also volunteering at our local museum. I mean, that is where I do more education, I would say, than anywhere else. This time of year, I just volunteer 1 day a week. Sometimes in the winter, I volunteer more. And then when we do special events and that too, but especially when the children are there We have lots of children there on field trips. So the time is focused from 10 a.m. to 1 or 2 p.m. During the school hours on school days. We could frequently talk to 400 or 500 or have 400 or 500 children through. Now, on a day like that, I might typically talk to 100 to 150 children myself. So, I've been tracking this, and over the last couple of years, well over 10,000 children that I've been able to speak to, and specifically about human evolution.
Oh.
So, that, and what we have there is, we don't have a permanent display set up on human evolution. So we use a table, and when I started, we had 5 skulls, I think, and that was it, a little bit of literature. But over the last, 2-3 years, we've expanded it to, we've got about 10, 11 different skulls now. And we go basically from Lucy through modern humans. We show some of the offshoots like Australopithecus or Paranthropus, they call it Boisei now. And we also talk about Homo naledi, about the Hobbit, Homo floresiensis, and how they're kind of offshoots of the main evolutionary line. But we show the transitions from Australopithecus afarensis to Africanus to Homo habilis to Homo erectus. Homo heidelbergensis, which is the split between us and Neanderthals, and then of course Neanderthals and us, and you tailor your presentation to who is listening. If I've got a group of adults that scheduled a trip or something in there, and human origins is one of their main things, I might talk 20 minutes to a group like that, go into a lot more detail, talk about genetics and other things.
Or simplify it for the kids.
Yeah, but if I've got a group of 8-year-olds or 7-year-olds, and they're looking at the dinosaurs on the wall, and whatever. I mean, I may just keep it down to just a short few minutes and ask them. But you try to get them involved.
Can you do your human origin story with puppets?
Well, I can do it with skulls. I don't know how I can do it with puppets. I'd have to have puppets with skulls.
Hey, Ernie, do you know about our ancestry? No, Bert. What's that?
That would be interesting, yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's what we do at the museum. And I've also worked on helping train other people. So we have coverage. Most days, about 5 to 6 days usually. The museum is open 6 days a week, so closed on Mondays. But that way we have some consistency in what we teach, and everybody gets a good background in it. So
I don't have any museums near where I live, at least where I can get to it easily. In fact, I think the closest one I have, unfortunately, is Kin's Museum.
Oh wow, you're in that. Where you're in Kentucky then, or
I'm in Ohio,
Vandalia, Ohio, okay.
Vandalia, Ohio, which is an hour north of Cincinnati. I live about an hour north of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh wow, okay.
From the area the museum's at, Cincinnati area, give or take.
Well, Cincinnati's probably got a museum, don't they? But maybe not like a natural history museum or something that.
I gotta look at that, but I only have a car right now, so it's hard to get places.
Okay, yeah.
But
some other things on science education. I'm a member of the National Center for Science Education, the NCSE, and out of all the organizations that I belong to, I'm probably least active in that as a member. But the reason I keep up my membership is we get notifications through email and such where different things that are coming up, like legal issues, where we have things in different states where maybe they're trying to push creationism or something into schools. We get notifications on that, so we're able to contact the different legislators. It's mostly stuff at the state level. There's really nothing on the national level on that. But I mean, just to give an example, we had that happen here in Arizona. And starting in 2016, we had a state school superintendent, Diane Douglas, who's Christian, but I don't know if she's young Earth creationist or not. I wouldn't doubt it. But she was basically trying to water down the science standards here in Arizona. And the way they were doing that was changing the wording of the science standards. And they can do this somewhat without having approval or putting anything to a vote. There's a committee that was doing this behind the doors, behind the scenes, and suggesting, removing the word evolution just out of a certain sentence, things like that, which would have opened up the door to teaching alternate possibilities like intelligent design or creationism. So once that became exposed, and I learned about it through the NCSE. And myself and I'm not taking credit for what happened. I mean, there was a lot of people involved, but I mean, there was a big letter writing campaign and just posting it in social media, making people aware, and it was quelled, it was stopped. But not only that, she ended up finishing third in her own primary. And it became a major issue in the primary, the teaching of creationism, to where pretty much the only Republican that wasn't coming out and saying he was for teaching creationism was the one who got elected in the GOP primary to become the next state superintendent. Now, they end up losing to a Democrat, which in Arizona is a fairly big deal, even with, current politics here. I mean, Arizona's been a red state for a long time. So it was a pretty big deal that we put a Democrat in the state school superintendent position. And a lot of it had to do with the science standards, to be honest.
I'm glad the public's getting that to get on the side,
Mm-hmm.
Like, it, well, like I was talking about, I mentioned this in the Facebook post and stuff, but I was thinking about stuff like, for the viewers here, like when I was growing up in the 90s in school, they were still teaching, the five kingdoms: animal, plant, fungus, protist, and I think it was monotrellia or bacteria, monoria. I forget how you pronounced it, but then later, and also they're also teaching the five vertebrates, fish, amphibian, reptile, birds, and mammals. But then later on in the 2000s, when I started YouTube, I found out about there's the three domains, bacteria, archaea, and eukaryote, and where the eukaryote had the plant, animals, and the fungus and other stuff too. And I found out that they had known that since the 70s, years before I was even born. But that it wasn't 20 years later. It wasn't in the science books in school. Still. And then I learned about how fish isn't, about how the clade stuff, how fish isn't really a thing, and
how much science did you actually get in school, and was it required, or were they elective courses? Or
it wasn't required, I think, at least in middle school and high school, to graduate basic science stuff.
Right.
I learned, but later on, I was learning about how birds and reptiles are almost close together, and how alligators are totally separate from lizards, but they're closer to birds, and all that stuff. And that's been known for years too. But like I said, I guess the science books in school couldn't keep up with even 20 years later. They are still far behind the discoveries.
It could be that some of the textbooks are still outdated, or they just don't focus on teaching that. They focus on giving you such a broad overview that they don't go into depth on much of anything at all. And that's one of the things where I've spoken with teachers that have come in, or even high school kids and stuff that have come in, and I've asked them, I said, have you learned about human evolution in school? And they're like, not really. I mean, they've touched on evolution in biology class and that type of thing, but they don't get into any specifics on human evolution. They don't learn about even, let's say, my 20-minute presentation that I did, opening presentation I did for my thing with Kent Hovind. That was more information than they were exposed to throughout all of high school on human evolution. They just don't get it. They don't understand it, and they don't get the.
I think I've learned more watching YouTube and Google in the last few years than I ever did in school. Sometimes,
which you got to be careful because it's not always correct, accurate too. Yeah.
I wish I could read some actually scientific journal stuff, but it's hard to find actually real scientific journals, but you can't get to them that easily.
Right. It is tougher. I try to follow a lot of stuff, and I've joined Academia EDU and also ResearchGate is a really good resource. ResearchGate, you can join as an independent researcher or whatever. You don't have to be affiliated with, say, a university or something. And then as these articles come out, most of the time, even stuff that's published in Nature and things like that will be available on ResearchGate. And I've found that what you have to do is write and request to the person, the author, hey, I'm just really interested in this, or I have a project I'm working on this or whatever, and just write to them and ask them for access to the article, and they will. You get an email back where they give you full access. So that's good to have. And I do that on a lot of the human origin stuff, and then again pass it on to people at the museum. But to be honest, I mean, we have people at the museum that would probably have full access to that too and could do it the other way around. So, but ResearchGate is a really good resource for that. So,
okay. I'll check that out. So do you think, I was wondering, do you think the slowness of it just because it's catching up stuff, or you think like the creationist stuff or blocking stuff?
Well, I think if someone is homeschooled or they're going to they're in a school where they're not talking about it very much, I mean, evolution, that type of thing, and I think you probably have a lot of schools that the teachers themselves aren't sold on it, and so they're not really pushing it, and so even in science class, then you do run the risk of a lot of people not being exposed to the real science. And then, of course, you have the people that, the kids are maybe exposed, but you've got them out there promoting ways to counter that, and telling the kids just not to believe it. So that's a big problem too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
one of the things I was real worried about with our current administration at our national level was when Betsy DeVos was named, and is a involved with education. She had previously funded groups that promoted intelligent design, and also charter schools, which can get around a lot of the state regulations or guidelines for teaching science. So I was real worried about that, but it turns out that it hasn't been as extreme as we worried about, for sure. So, and I think a lot of that is just, the science people pushing back, and not willingly doing what they had originally proposed. I think they didn't realize the resistance that they were going to get at the lower levels too. But
yeah, I remember everyone was scared about the vice president too. It's for the same reason.
Yeah, he doesn't have as direct of an impact as somebody like a Betsy DeVos would, but absolutely. I mean, he's I don't know if he's young Earth or not. I wouldn't be surprised. So he definitely was questioning. It sounded like the age of the Earth and some of those things in earlier interviews and stuff years ago. So. Yeah. So, yeah, some other things. I just finished a book. Oh, I thought I had it here. Yeah, I do have it here. This is a real good one.
Oh, hey,
I'm gonna
Jimbo. Hey, Jimbo. Hey, Jimbo. Nice to see you. I see you. You're from my Discord, right? Go on.
Oh, is this? Oh, okay. Hey, Jimbo's. All right. This is a book I just finished. It's called The Seashell on the Mountaintop. So it goes through and talks about early discoveries in geology. And, these were Christians that were making these discoveries. And, discovering that the earth was a lot older than people had originally thought. These weren't people that were out to destroy the church by publishing this stuff. These were people that were cautiously proposing things lest they be burned at the stake. It's real interesting. I mean, about Nicholas Steno and stuff, and things that happened back in the 1600s. It was a whole different world back then, and science was a new thing. It was just getting started. So
is that related? Is that the book? Is that related? They discovered about tectonics and how mountains rose up and stuff.
No, it's way before that, because this is literally talking about stuff that happened in the 1700s. So,
okay.
But fossils in mountains were a big, I don't know what the word for you, mystery back then. One of the main schools of thought wasn't, believe it or not, Noah's flood. It was that these things were generated inside the mountains. That it was a natural. They occurred like gems and minerals, just like gems and minerals could form inside the mountains. Seashells could too, and that they weren't necessarily connected with life in the ocean. So, and that surprised me. I didn't know about all the history of that. So I just assumed they always thought it was the flood. But no, that was actually one of the main thoughts, was that these things materialized, and ammonites and things like that are very symmetrical, and they compared them to crystals. They would form the same way. They formed inside the mountain under natural processes, not that they ever were part of an actual living creature in the ocean. So it was real interesting. But they didn't have living creatures that were like that to compare them with. So and the concept of extinction was new to these people too. So they didn't, long ages was a new thing. But Steno came up with the principle of superposition, which basically states that in an undisturbed, the layers on the bottom are going to be older than the layers on the top. The layers on the top are going to be newer, more recent, as long as the strata is undisturbed. And that was his principle of superposition. But interestingly enough, late in life, he gave up. He was really started off as doing anatomy and doing dissections and things like that, but with humans, and then got into geology, and then later in life just left that all behind, left science all the way behind, and had joined the Catholic Church. He was originally Protestant and devoted his life to the church, but became died a recluse basically. So it was really interesting book. Yeah. But I'm going to do a review on that, and I might even do a video on some of that stuff, because there was some really, really interesting things there about early science.
Yeah, it's a good science. That stuff, and I didn't know some of this stuff was really recent, like the plate tectonics, the plate tectonic stuff, and even the dinosaur asteroid hypothesis theory. That I didn't know that stuff came about almost rather recently.
Oh yeah, plate tectonics as a theory, as an actual scientific theory, we're talking the 1960s. Before that, we had
expanding Earth thing.
Well, what do they call it? I can't even think of it now. I don't know why it's escaping me, but it was a continental drift. Okay, continental drift, which people looked at the different continents and they realized that there's fossils here that are found here that are over there. There's things look like they fit together in some way. There are layers of strata, sedimentary layers, or even igneous layers of things that match up from one continent to the next. It looks like they were once connected. But the problem with continental drift was they never came up with a mechanism for the how it worked, So it was an idea that never had a mechanism to show how it could have happened. And it wasn't until we discovered the mid-ocean ridges and actually were able to start measuring the movements of the continental plates that plate tectonics had the answer to all of it by then. So, yeah.
Okay. Kind of like how evolution, people thought about that before, but then it wasn't until Darwin, that natural selection thing, that people clicked into place.
Right. They called it transmutation and different things. And there were a lot of people before Darwin, and a lot of creationists will say he wasn't original. He didn't have, but he and both Wallace and he at roughly the same time were the first to come up with a mechanism of how it all occurred and put it all together into a comprehensive scientific theory. So
you don't hear about Wallace much.
You don't that much, yeah. But Wallace, he didn't go as near as far as Darwin, as far as natural selection and stuff got down. But Wallace was still more religious, and he didn't go near as far as Darwin in explaining it and going into detail. And he didn't write near. I mean, he didn't write much about it at all. I mean, he had a thesis that was similar to what Darwin's was for natural selection in the beginning, but that was really it. So that's one of the reasons why.
All right.
Yeah. But yeah, that's been interesting to me lately, definitely. So,
so what got you into to learning about this? You always interested in science, or?
Yeah, I was interested in science. As a kid, I would find fossils. We had a summer home I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, but we had a summer home on Lake Huron, north of Port Huron, Michigan, and I collected Petoskey stones and other fossils and things we would find there, and I was always kind of interested into it. It wasn't like my main interest, but I guess it was, and I've told this story a couple times before. It was when I was in college that I realized there was such a thing as young Earth creationists. I had a friend who had a couple of roommates that at the dorm there that were young Earth creationists, and it was like, wow. I mean, here I am taking classes in geology and stuff, and I'm having a beer after class with these guys that think the world is 6,000 years old and people rode dinosaurs, and I didn't know people like that existed.
Yeah, I didn't know. Even when I was a creationist, older Earth, I didn't know the younger Earth thing was happening, because the way the way my church at the time preacher at the time taught us was, there's an Earth before that, and then the theory is now it's called, but that's when God had to double down, Earth got rebooted, I guess, like restarted. That's when the current timeline happened. That's what they taught us back in the day.
Okay, yeah. Then in the 90s, I got my first computer, my compact. I got back in Christmas '95.
Back when they still had floppy disks.
Oh yeah, it was a Pentium 200. That was the hot processor that came out, right that year, and I still had to back everything up on floppy disks. It was one of the first computers that had a 28.8 modems, which was high speed at the time.
I remember when I got my besides before I had an Apple computer, but I remember when I first got my first non-Apple PC computer, I was so excited because I had a 5 gigabyte hard drive.
Oh yeah, it was a 5 gig hard drive in that one too. Yeah.
5 gigabytes. I'm like, I think most things now, 5 gigabytes. That's like
most of our phones have 3 or 4 times the amount of storage of that now. But I mean, that was a big deal at the time. And I remember the salesman, when I was looking at different computers, that was one of the things that swayed me to get the one I got, was 5 gigabytes. It says you'll never fill that hard drive. Yeah, right. But anyway, once I got online, I got my AOL account.
that too.
That AOL disk in the mail, and got my OL account, and you know, I started running into stuff where through whatever, you know, I found some of these forums where they discuss creationism and atheist versus Christian kind of things like that, and so I got involved in it at that time. But you know, I guess it was 2000. About 2000 is when I really got involved in it more with a specific forum that I was a member of, and you know, that's when I heard all the Hovind stuff and all those type of things that, you know, people were always referencing him, and you know, guys like Ray Comfort and
I didn't even know Hovind
Wayne Gish and, you know, stuff.
I didn't know Hovind was a thing until I watched Logic's video.
Really? Yeah.
Even going to church for the first 29 years of my life, I was like.
Well, Hovind was in prison for 9 years, so he didn't do much from 2006 on until 2015. So that's probably one of the reasons why you didn't hear much about him, because you probably were. It was probably during that time that you were listening and started to get involved in it. You know, because like you said, he's only been back in it for about the last 3 years now since he got out of prison. So yeah.
Yeah, I was more always growing up. Even now, I was always more in the history part of the world. You know, like history, like not the how like thing, but more like the when it happened. You know, and the how. You know what I mean? And the science part, I was mostly in like biology and food and the food chains. I used to love food chains. Growing up, I always tried to find the longest food chain connection.
That's kind of interesting, yeah.
From like plants to like the biggest predator ever. You know how long it can go.
What's the biggest one you ever found?
I don't know. I don't know if I found it or not, but it's like probably somewhere in the ocean, I guess. You know,
right?
Plankton, other plankton, small fish, bigger fish, octopuses, crabs, eels, sharks, orcas, you know. The funniest food chain video I ever saw on YouTube where this shark was attacking this seal, right, trying to eat it, and then this orca came out and grabbed the shark out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of documentaries and stuff. I have probably watched almost all the free documentaries you can watch, say on YouTube or whatever. Before
the YouTube takes them down.
Right. But I don't know if you ever heard of Curiosity Stream, but that's a real good documentary.
I think I've heard of that before.
You know, it's one like we have Roku. I mean, you can get it on Roku, but anything that's been on Netflix, Curiosity Stream, Hulu, all that stuff. I watch all that, of course. Again, stuff on YouTube. Some of the YouTube stuff is not always the best quality, but I know on my website I have a documentaries page where I've listed or put up, you know, links there to some of my favorites. You know, some of the good ones. There are some great in-depth things by people like Carta, you know, University of California, things like that on human origins. A lot of lectures, some of the lectures series that they've put out, and things that are really excellent, that are stuff that people probably aren't as aware of. But even just the planet Earth type things, you know, and David Attenborough and stuff like that. I mean, I've seen all those a million times. I'm a big fan of him, all those. So.
Yeah, I think my favorite of the documentaries I ever saw was like a 5-6 part series where they're talking about, I forget what it was called, but they're talking about each of the major extinction events of the past. Okay, yeah. What the life was like at the time, and how it happened, and who or what died, and how it like after the event, how it like blossomed back out again, the survivors. Right.
Huh, that's good. Yeah, even Cosmos, the more recent Cosmos, when Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about each extinction event and that type of thing too. So
yeah, I hear. You know, I think I don't count or not, but But I always thought that the first major extinction event, they say it was the first major one was the the Ordiffian Solution thing. But wouldn't the first one be like the oxygen one? That not capped. You know what I'm talking about? Where
like when we had snowball Earth type thing, or
oh yeah, where the cyanide bacteria came out and pumped the oxygen out on the Earth, and half the were killed because they
right. I just don't know how well that's documented as far as we don't really know. But then we had snowball Earth twice, where I knew we had a first. I didn't actually know that happened twice until recently. I knew about one of them, but until recently I learned that it happened at least 2 times. Right. And it was after the second one that we saw life start to really diversify. Just prior to the Cambrian, there was something called the Avalon Explosion before the Cambrian explosion. Have you heard of that one?
Like Avalon? No, I have not heard that one.
Yeah. In fact, on my documentaries page at creationsciencefiction.com, I have that PBS Eons did a video. It's probably only 10 minutes long or so on that.
I watched them too.
But it's a really good short video talking about the Avalon Explosion, which was prior to the Cambrian explosion. When we went from really simple life to multicellular life, and then of course with the oxygenation and other things in the beginning of the Cambrian, and for signs of fossilized life. I mean, when they originally described the Cambrian, the date that they assigned it was basically where we started finding fossils. And so we didn't find any fossils older than that. So now we found, of course, fossils and things older than that. But that was the original designation for the beginning of the Cambrian.
Yeah, until at least 10 years ago, give or take, I didn't know there was an AR before the Cambrian.
Yeah.
I knew it was pre-Cambrian. I knew that, but I didn't know there was different. I knew about the Archean age and all the stuff before that. I'm
well, one of the things the creationists or young Earth creationists will say is that the Cambrian layers are the beginning of where the flood started laying things down, but they have nothing existing before then, anything remotely like anything we have today. So it's things never died, they were never fossilized. I mean, it's just crazy, doesn't make any sense at all. So
a little joke I made. I was listening to Nephilim Free's debate with Jackson Wheat, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But
I still haven't watched that debate. I guess they had something a week or two ago, a couple weeks ago.
I was watching it, listening to it at work, and Jackson asked him, he asked a question that he definitely couldn't answer. Probably, he said, "Did Noah have any therapsids on the ark, and how many?" I don't know. And I'm I said it silently. Well, I know there's at least 8 of them. If the ark was true, at least 8. No one in his family.
Gosh, yeah. Right. We are. Yeah.
Also, another joke I made up earlier. Do you know Ken Ham was right? There were dinosaurs on the ark, for real. You know who they were? The raven and the dove. And
there you go. Yeah.
For dinosaurs, right? So there were dinosaurs on the ark. So he was right all along.
And are they the same kind? They must be. Ravens and doves must be different kinds of birds if we had 2 different types like that on the ark. So, yeah.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And in Answers in Genesis, I think, has come up with 23 or 25, somewhere around there, different kinds of birds now, because they have to explain everything from penguins to ostrich to raptors to hummingbirds, and they're so different and such unique body plans that they have 24 or 23 or something like that different kinds of birds now that were on the ark. So
and then the kangaroo stuffed all the animals in their pouches and then jumped, and they made a big jump back to Australia.
Right, or floating mats of vegetation. Right, yeah, that's always a good one.
Everyone get in my pouch, stay there, and we'll make it back to Australia.
The two big answer everything excuses or whatever for anything to do with Noah's flood or the ark is floating mats of vegetation and tidal action. Those are the two things that you can count on hearing all the time.
Oh, I think they also said the ice age happened. The flood caused the ice age. So.
Right. And they'll say usually it happened within 300 or 400 years after the flood. But then we have literally the remains of millions of mammoths. We do. I mean, the tusks that have been harvested and found so far, fossils. I mean, there is evidence that there were millions of mammoths and different types of them. Well, how did we get millions of mammoths and all these different species of mammoth, mastodon, and other elephant-type animals from one pair on an ark if the ice age started within 200 or 300 years after that and was done by 800 years? There's not enough time. Not enough time for the diversification and multiplication of all those animals.
I guess that meant the animals bred like rabbits and like had kids in a day or two. Like, okay,
right, yeah.
Like, okay, next day, time to procreate again.
Yeah, certainly doesn't match what we see with them today and the way they reproduce. But they'll have an excuse for everything. So that's for sure. And
dinosaurs. I learned recently there's like 3 camps of dinosaur people. 1, the dinosaurs were on the ark and then died right afterwards. 2, the dinosaurs died in the flood.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, dinosaurs didn't exist. The new one, dinosaurs never existed at all. It's all
right. Yeah, those are the 3. Yeah.
I didn't. The third one wasn't even an option. Like so recent, like
eyes of the devil, planted by the devil. Fossils were planted by the devil to fool us. The trickster god. Yeah. So. There are a few people like that. I've unfortunately ran into some people at our museum, not that are like that, but that have been taught that and are out showing their children that don't listen to what grandma and grandpa said, kids. Dinosaurs were real. And they're literally bringing their children to a museum to show them dinosaurs because the kids have been told when they stay with grandma and grandpa that dinosaurs weren't real. I have gotten, I shouldn't say I haven't had confrontations because I don't ever let it get to that point, but I have had people get upset with me. Have that happened not too long ago, maybe 3 weeks ago with, there were 3 women and they were very upset that I was teaching human evolution at the museum. And they were there alone. I mean, they weren't with a group or anything. And they were all probably between 45 and 60 years old. And they flat out told me what I was doing was terrible. It was wrong. Lucy is a hoax and blah, blah, blah. And, what I'm doing is just horrible. And I just have to smile and thank them and tell them to enjoy their day at the Natural History Museum, I mean, because you're not going to argue with people like that. We're taught to just smile and nod our head and tell them to have a nice day and enjoy the rest of your visit at the Natural History Museum.
I never understood that personally. I mean, I get.
I wanted to say, why are you here?
Yeah, eventually, some people do go to places and they learn stuff. Some people are actually curious, see if they're right or not, and go there and they actually learn stuff. Other people go places just to like troll them or whatever, like the person attack, like say like couple shipping on YouTube and stuff and channels where you hate that couple, but you go to that channel anyways just to provoke people.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like that. I'm more like. I disagree with you, but I'm not gonna go there just to provoke you. Like you're
right.
wrong, you stupid bitch.
No, I do know some people that we would have street preachers down here in Tempe on Friday nights or whatever, and some people that used to go down there to kind of taunt the street preachers at night, but I guess that's a little different,
Yeah,
I never did that. No.
I think by doing that, I think it gives them what they want. See that I'm being attacked. That makes me I'm right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's too bad I didn't run into Ray Comfort when I was living in Southern California, though. That would have been fun. So everything he's got is rehearsed, though, So it's just so sad to see the videos he puts out and everything where he, and then he edits everything just so when he finally gets the response he wants, he's going to publish that and he'll ignore all the other legitimate responses and things. So.
It's, I don't say it's sad or convenient, like what you did with Kent, that they, even years later, they have the same catchphrases.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you can like I said, I was watching Aaron Rawls' discussion or thing with Kent Hovind, the videos he did last year, the back and forth.
Yeah.
And Kent was saying the exact same thing that he said in Logic's video from when before prison, like 20 years ago. The exact same line for line.
Oh yeah. Same with his new seminar series. I did a little video on that myself where I showed, has anything changed in the last 20 years? And he was literally reading things line for line for line. And somebody else did one recently on Eric Hovind the same way, where Eric literally, I mean, a lot of the stuff that Eric pushes, not so much as much today, but of course, when Eric was starting off, when his dad went to prison, all he was doing was reading exactly, using the same script as his father. I mean, just to the word, so, yeah. But, oh, well, it's worked for him. It's worked for them. They've made a lot of money off of it over the years. So,
yeah. Back in my third season of my podcast, when I had Gabe and Brett on talking about this stuff, we were discussing, who, and if this is the Olympics, who would get the gold, silver, and bronze? Kent, Ken Ham, or Ray Comfort? I
don't know. Ham is definitely the most prominent of the three. I wouldn't say legitimate because he's not legitimate, but most prominent. He has the Creation Museum, the Ark Encounter. He has the recognition. He's making the most income out of the three. I'm sure of that. Ray Comfort has a lot of followers. He's not just as much into the creationism thing as the other two are. I mean, it's not always his main focus, Yeah. But Hovind, he's been, he did it to himself, but, he had his major setback where he was in prison for 9 years, and then he gets out and, his family disowned him, and he's just a nasty person. I think he's a very angry person. He's, he has 130 something thousand followers on YouTube, but when he puts out a video, he gets a few thousand views, and that's about it. I mean, he doesn't get, I'm not saying I have more. I don't. But I put out a video 2 weeks ago. It has 35,000 views. Ken puts out a video 2 weeks ago. He's lucky to have 6,000 or 7,000 views. He has all these followers supposedly, but they're either not interested anymore, which a lot of them probably aren't, or they're there to watch the train wreck. It's people like you and me that subscribe so they can laugh, or whatever it is. What he's doing is not having an impact. It's not having an impact like he used to 20 years ago.
I tried watching it. I can't watch the Ken Hovind video for long periods of time.
Yeah, me either.
I don't know what it is, but nowadays I need. I don't know, my brain doesn't function like that anymore. But I need the response videos to buffer it out a little bit, So
yeah, well, it's his attitude, his voice, his attitude, the condescending attitude he has, and the know-it-all, authoritative type attitude, where it's just all rehearsed baloney,
Yeah,
so.
But we came from rocks.
Yeah,
we believe. That's my favorite thing in your debate with Kent was, where you kept on telling them about the population things. Like he said, we don't know. He kept on saying, we don't know if this bone had kids. You kept on saying, it doesn't matter if that one had kids. there's other people in that community besides just that one person, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like not on an island, not they weren't on an island by themselves, you know. Other people were there too. That's how they populate.
Right.
Like,
And then he accused me of making that up. He actually did a real response video afterwards where he said, or he mentioned it during the debate too, though, where he said, well, now you're changing it. You're saying it's a population. And I've said it's always been that way. I mean, Darwin himself, never predicted that one animal would give birth to a different species.
Isn't that called asexual?
Never.
That's asexual production.
Well, no, every animal, is always going to give birth to the same species, but populations change over time. And that is the crux of the theory of evolution. And he was accusing me of trying to change it. It's like, no, you just don't understand it.
I know.
You
It's
don't
like
understand it at all.
like unless you produce asexually, you need at least 2 people to produce next generation. You know, at least 2.
Yeah. So, sexual reproduction gives you more diversity than, asexual reproduction, because you're not just copying yourself too.
Asexual, you might get some mutations here and there, but
right.
You combine them together, you definitely get at least more mutations, I guess.
Well, or you're starting with 2 to begin with and making a third, so you're always going to have more diversity.
This combined together period.
Right. Yep. So, yeah. What else do you got?
More opinion. This is more fact, but more opinion thing. Do you think there's a retrovirus on each? Retroviruses on each of this speciation splits, and that maybe that's how we get speciation sometimes.
I don't know much about retroviruses, so I really am not.
I remember that recently.
I'm not a genetics person much or whatever. I think if you're talking about rapid speciation or something, maybe. But speciation takes, a long time. Typically you're going to take 1 million years or more for something to become a new species, through traditional ways of becoming isolated genetically or geographically, and through genetic drift and just through different mutations or whatever. At least like looking at mammals and stuff, it takes a long time. As far as what role retroviruses might have to play in it, I have no idea. Yeah.
Okay. And also, you said you're the human origin stuff. I was wondering this. Do we know officially, or is it still debated, like Neanderthals? Are they a separate species, or are they like subspecies?
It's debated. There is no consensus, that's for sure. It was discussed, really, it was first brought up, let's say, in mainly in, say, the late 70s and 80s, where they started talking about us both being a subspecies of Homo sapiens.
Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens sapiens.
Right. That's when you started to hear that. Now, after that, the first genetic, and that's because they started noticing, more and more of them, and maybe they overlapped in different times. And we didn't have the evidence of interbreeding yet, really, until later. But the first genetic evidence we had was just through mitochondrial DNA. And so they noticed immediately in sequencing the mitochondrial genomes that there wasn't any overlap. Okay. So all of a sudden you got people saying, wait, we were separate totally, because there's no overlap. We don't see any mitochondrial DNA shared between us and them. Then they went further and started getting the sequencing the nuclear DNA. So rather than just looking at Y chromosome or mitochondrial, start looking at the nuclear DNA, and they started to realize, yes, we did share genes with them. But, the people that I respect the most, paleoanthropologists, people like Chris Stringer, they would still say, I believe today, that we are a separate yet very closely related species. If you want to look at it anatomy-wise, there are anatomical traits that we don't share with each other. I mean, creationists will look at Neanderthals and say, well, some of us have brow ridges, so blah, blah, blah. We're all, no, but that's not the defining trait of Neanderthals. I mean, and even the brow ridge that they had was a solid brow ridge, not divided like the ones that we find typically in Homo sapiens. So, but I mean, to make a long story short, I personally think they're separate yet. And it's actually evidence for evolution. I mean, if we separated from them, let's say 700,000 to 800,000 years ago, it's still been less than 1 million years. Okay. And I mentioned earlier that it takes around 1 million years to become completely separate species, but we were definitely on our way. If we weren't, we were on our way. Had we been genetically isolated for another 300,000 years, we probably wouldn't have been able to reproduce. And the evidence that we show is that Neanderthals have influenced our genome. There's nothing yet. None of the studies, even on the more recent Neanderthals of say 37 to 45,000 year old DNA of theirs, we don't see where modern humans influence their genome. Only the other way around. And one of the ways that can happen is through hybridization, where hybrids could mate back with one, but not the other. And two hybrids couldn't produce offspring. So you can see that with lions and tigers today. I've used this example before. You could have a ligers, but two ligers can't produce fertile offspring. But a liger may be able to mate back with, let's say, a female tiger. And now you've transferred some genes from a lion to a tiger, but not the other way around, because it only goes one way. And that's likely the way that, with the evidence we have right now, that we see it happening with Neanderthals. So very closely but separate species, definitely had different traits. By the time we came around and really expanded into Europe and Asia, they were already on their downfall as far as numbers. Climate change had happened. I mean, the Ice Age was under full swing, but as all that retreated, and they lost the habitat that they were used to, by that time, everything had changed. Their whole environment had changed, and we came along in greater numbers, and
it's like
we
below,
exactly.
Everything else you do. So like I was saying, so we have started the split, but we were still not as far off the way we couldn't.
Well, what you probably had was some gene flow. I mean, you had various populations leaving Africa at different times, and enough to where we maintained a slight amount of gene flow between the two. Or, like I said, we were only separated for a few tens of thousands of years, or a couple 100,000 years between experiences of interbreeding or gene flow. So we remained still close enough to where, even after, say, 600,000 years, we could still interbreed. But with the more recent ones, like the 37 and 40,000 year old Neanderthals, we don't really see evidence that we interbred with those. We see evidence we interbred with Neanderthals over 100,000 years ago.
Because by then we were too far split apart, maybe?
Possibly, or by then the Neanderthals we interbred with were more the Middle Eastern and Western Asian ones, and not so much the European ones. And
would that be like ring species things? The closer ones can mate with each other, but the further ones can't.
What was the example? The
ring species things. The closer ones in the ring can mate with each other, but then
possibly, right? Yeah.
Out.
It could possibly. Well, we see that like with baboons today in Africa. And I used that example, I think, during my debate with Hovind, even where, one of the olive baboon, I believe it is a hybrid between two species. We know that's initially how it started out, but you can have, or you can see it like even with rabbits in the United States today or whatever. Rabbits in Florida can't interbreed with rabbits in Alaska, but they can interbreed with rabbits in other parts of the country, and so can the Alaskan ones. But you get a certain point where they've been genetically and geographically isolated for so long they can no longer interbreed, but yet they're all rabbits,
So the ones in the middle are getting all the action.
Right, like rabbits. Yep. So, but anyway, yeah. I mean, to answer your question, I think they're a closely related yet slightly separate species from us, and some will agree with me and some won't. But That's the way it is in paleoanthropology. They don't agree on a lot of things. So
also, I remember, I don't know if it's true or not. I remember years ago I was watching a documentary about cavemen and stuff, where they're talking about the different species of homos, and at the time, at least, might have changed since then. They're like Homo gaster was in Africa. Some of them left Africa and became Homo erectus, and the ones that left, and the ones that left and stayed in Africa became Homo heidelbergensis, and then the Homo heidelbergensis left, and the ones that left became Neanderthals, and then the ones that stayed became Homo sapiens, and then they left too.
No, that's basically right. I mean, that's the way we understand it today. Some, there's lumpers and splitters. So some are going to say that Ergaster and Erectus should be the same species, and they don't even recognize Ergaster as a separate species. Others will say, they're a little more gracile or whatever. They're a little different than Homo erectus, the Asian. But, it's diversity among population, and especially when they've been genetically isolated. Again, it's just more evidence of evolution to me. But what you just described is still what they're talking about. Basically, yeah, some, erectus eventually became, or Ergaster eventually became Heidelbergensis, and Heidelbergensis originated in Africa, and then the ones that remained became Homo sapiens. The ones that left became Neanderthals. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then also I learned this too. Also, like they somebody mentioned the language thing compared to languages where like you mentioned it too. No one gave birth to the first human or whatever, or somebody into that. Like it's like how no one ever automatically went from Latin to Spanish or Latin to Italian. It was a gradually thing.
Okay, yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, wherever you're going to say the first human was, you're just you're assigning a random designation to that or whatever. I mean, that's just like we look at these 315 or 1,000-year-old what they're calling Homo sapiens in Morocco, okay? And they still have archaic traits. They have elongated skulls. They have, brow ridges. Or they don't look like modern humans. They're not saying that they look like modern humans, but they're calling them Homo sapiens. Well, you can call them Homo sapiens, but I mean, you're just, it's not really pushing back anything we already knew. It's just you're designating a name somewhere to it.
Like the craziness want to have, okay, this is when the first one was born, like a miracle thing. Like this is when I have.
Yeah.
but when I learned that you said population and stuff, it's like step by step thing.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't even notice.
Yep. So. All right. Well, I got to get rolling pretty quick here. I told my girlfriend an hour because we were going to make dinner, and now it's a little after 7 here. So, what time is it where you're at?
10:07.
10:07. Okay.
All right. Well, anyways, thanks for being here. Go to his channel. Links in the description below. Hope to see you again in the future. And vice versa. I hope maybe I can make an appearance on your channel sometime in the future.
Awesome.
I don't know. I'm not that smart.
I haven't done many interviews. I have done them like specifically for things with Jackson and stuff like that. But as far as like a hangout type thing, I haven't really done much of that. I did my first one a couple of weeks ago with Pelagia and Jackson and Tony Reed. But you never know. I might start doing some of those. Yeah,
I saw you. I think I first saw you when you guest starred on Pelagia's channel. As the cartoon.
Right.
But anyways, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. I'll see you next time. Bye.
All right.